What happens when a wall built on power, wealth, and influence finally begins to crack? For years, Donald Trump seemed untouchable, brushing off scandals, investigations, and lawsuits as if nothing could stop him. But today, that wall is showing signs of collapse, and the fractures are spreading faster than ever. From courtroom battles to public opinion, the shield he once relied on is breaking apart piece by piece. The question now isn't if his defenses will fall, it's when. Stay with me, because the cracks in Trump's legal wall reveal a story bigger than anyone expected. Number 1. Mounting court cases. The first major crack in Trump's legal wall comes from the sheer volume of cases piling up against him. This isn't just one lawsuit that can be managed quietly behind the scenes. It's a growing list of criminal indictments, civil suits, and investigations, stretching across multiple states and jurisdictions. Each case brings with it different judges, lawyers, prosecutors, and legal strategies. Think of it like a dam holding back water. One small leak can be patched, but when holes begin appearing everywhere, the entire structure starts to weaken. Trump's situation is no different. The more cases filed, the harder it becomes to coordinate a consistent defense. What makes this even more damaging is the compounding effect. When one court date overlaps with another, when lawyers are stretched thin trying to prepare for hearings in different locations, mistakes are bound to happen. These errors might seem small at first, a late filing, a technical oversight, but in legal battles, even tiny slips can shift outcomes. It also creates a psychological toll. Imagine trying to focus on your daily responsibilities while knowing that at any moment another court summons could land on your desk. For Trump, this legal overload means living in constant anticipation of the next blow, making it harder to maintain the aura of control he once projected. The broader impact is that these multiple cases strip away the narrative of strength and invulnerability. Each new indictment grabs headlines, dominates news cycles, and keeps the story alive in the public's mind. This isn't a single scandal that fades after a week. It's a constant drumbeat reminding everyone that legal troubles are closing in. Prosecutors understand this dynamic and use it to their advantage, ensuring momentum never slows. For Trump, every added case is not just another legal challenge, but another public crack in the wall, a visible sign that his fortress of protection is beginning to crumble. Number 2. Financial pressure. Another deep fracture in Trump's legal wall comes from the immense financial burden created by ongoing lawsuits and investigations. Legal defense at this scale isn't cheap. Top-tier attorneys charge thousands of dollars per hour. Expert witnesses demand steep fees, and endless filings, motions, and appeals add up quickly. What began as a manageable expense has snowballed into tens of millions of dollars in costs. Unlike a business investment where money spent might generate returns, every dollar poured into legal defense is a dollar lost, an expense with no upside. This financial drain is especially damaging because it restricts resources that could have been used to strengthen political campaigns or rebuild business ventures. The weight of these financial obligations also forces difficult choices. Funds must be raised, shifted, or borrowed, often under intense scrutiny. Political donations that might have fueled campaign rallies are instead funneled into covering attorney fees. That creates tension between maintaining a public image of power and meeting the private reality of mounting debts. For ordinary people, the comparison is straightforward. It's like maxing out multiple credit cards just to keep the lights on while the mortgage still looms. That kind of constant strain is unsustainable. Over time, the ability to fight effectively diminishes simply because the money runs out faster than it can be replaced. Beyond the numbers, the optics are just as damaging. Every report of campaign funds redirected to legal bills, every leaked figure about ballooning expenses, reinforces the sense of a fortress under siege. Supporters may still cheer loudly at rallies, but behind the curtain, the financial picture tells another story, one of desperation and depletion. Opponents seize on this weakness, painting a narrative that Trump's empire, once built on wealth and power, is now being hollowed out by the very system he claims to control. In politics, perception is often as lethal as reality, and the image of a leader drained by endless bills is a powerful symbol of decline. The financial pressure doesn't just erode his defenses in court, it also chips away at the myth of invincibility that has long fueled his influence. Number 3, erosion of loyalty. Perhaps the most dangerous crack in Trump's legal wall is the erosion of loyalty among those who once stood firmly by his side. For years, Trump cultivated an image of absolute control, projecting that allies and employees would shield him no matter the cost. But legal investigations change everything. Prosecutors often offer deals, reduced sentences, or immunity to insiders who are willing to talk. The result is a domino effect where one defection can trigger others, unraveling the tight-knit circle Trump relied on. What used to be private disagreements behind closed doors are now spilling into the courtroom as testimony and evidence. The pressure on former allies is immense. Legal jeopardy forces individuals to think less about loyalty and more about self-preservation. Aide after aide, advisor after advisor is confronted with the choice: stay silent and risk prison, or speak up and protect yourself. For many, the decision becomes clear once indictments start stacking up. Even those who remain publicly loyal often cooperate quietly to safeguard their futures. This shift reveals a key truth. Loyalty built on fear or ambition is fragile when tested by the weight of subpoenas and indictments. The cracks widen every time a former insider confirms details investigators already suspect, strengthening the case against Trump while dismantling the protective shield he thought he had. What makes this erosion so critical is not just the legal evidence it produces, but the symbolic impact it carries. When trusted figures flip, it signals weakness. The narrative of unwavering loyalty begins to collapse, replaced by stories of betrayal and self-interest. That perception spreads quickly, emboldening opponents and unsettling supporters who once believed the Trump circle was unbreakable. It also feeds the broader media cycle, where every new cooperation becomes a headline that reinforces vulnerability. In the courtroom, this betrayal translates into damning testimony. In the public eye, it portrays Trump as increasingly isolated. Both outcomes weaken his defense at a time when he can least afford it. The erosion of loyalty doesn't just puncture the legal wall, it dismantles the myth that Trump's empire is built on unshakable alliances.
Number 4. Mounting legal fees. Another widening crack in Trump's legal wall comes from the crushing weight of mounting legal fees. Defending multiple lawsuits and criminal charges at once is no small expense. Each case requires teams of attorneys, countless hours of preparation, and endless filings. Even for someone with deep pockets, the cost of simultaneous legal battles can bleed resources quickly. Trump is not only defending himself, but also, in many instances, covering expenses for allies, secure their continued loyalty. The financial drain is relentless, and it chips away at his ability to project strength and stability. Money that could have been used for political campaigning, business ventures, or image management is being funneled into courtrooms and law firms instead. The sheer scale of these expenses is staggering. Legal experts estimate that defending just one high-profile criminal case can cost millions, and Trump is facing not one, but several. On top of this, lawsuits tied to business practices, election challenges, and personal disputes add layers of cost. The constant outflow creates a visible weakness. Supporters and donors can see how resources are being consumed, and opponents can sense the vulnerability. This financial strain becomes more than just a private burden. It turns into a public story about dwindling reserves and financial fragility. For a figure who has built his brand on wealth and success, headlines about drained finances cut directly against his cultivated image. What makes the situation even more precarious is the ripple effect of these expenses. Mounting legal fees push Trump to rely heavily on fundraising, often blurring the lines between legal defense funds and campaign coffers. That in itself sparks controversy and scrutiny, raising questions about whether supporters' contributions are going to political causes or simply paying lawyers' bills. This damages trust and limits the effectiveness of future fundraising appeals. The financial drain also affects Trump's negotiating position in business, politics, and even within his own party. When the flow of money is strained, leverage weakens. Mounting legal fees are not just numbers on a ledger. They are an ongoing crack that undermines Trump's power, his narrative of success, and ultimately his ability to withstand the legal storm pressing against him.
Number 5, erosion of public trust. Another deep fracture in Trump's legal wall is the erosion of public trust. Legal troubles, even if defended with strong rhetoric, gradually wear down how people perceive a leader. Every indictment, lawsuit, or court appearance reinforces a narrative of dishonesty and misconduct. Supporters may initially dismiss these as political attacks, but as the number of cases piles up, skepticism begins to grow even among loyal followers. Trust, once chipped away, rarely rebuilds easily. For someone like Trump, who depends heavily on a base that sees him as an outsider fighting for their cause, repeated legal setbacks create doubt about whether he is truly capable of protecting their interests. Public trust is also eroded by the constant exposure of damaging details. Court documents, testimony, and investigative reports reveal stories that can't be controlled by campaign speeches or press statements. The more the public hears about alleged hush money, classified documents mishandling, or fraudulent practices, the harder it becomes to dismiss them as baseless claims. Even when Trump denies wrongdoing, the steady stream of legal headlines saturates public awareness. This shapes not only how voters view him, but also how potential allies, donors, and even foreign leaders perceive his stability and credibility. The erosion of trust is subtle but powerful, an invisible crack that spreads wider with every new revelation. This loss of trust also reshapes the political landscape. Rival candidates use it to their advantage, painting themselves as cleaner, stronger, and more dependable alternatives. Media outlets amplify the narrative, highlighting the contrast between Trump's promises and his legal struggles. For undecided voters or moderate conservatives, the weight of distrust can be decisive.
pushing them away from supporting him in future elections. In politics, perception often matters as much as reality, and once public trust falters, it is extraordinarily difficult to reclaim. The erosion of trust weakens Trump not just in the courtroom, but also in the court of public opinion, where credibility is currency and doubt is poison.
Number 6, mounting financial strain. One of the most pressing cracks in Trump's legal wall is the mounting financial strain caused by endless lawsuits and investigations. Legal battles at this scale are not only time-consuming, but also extremely expensive. Lawyers' appeals, settlements, and court fees quickly add up to millions of dollars. While Trump has historically relied on his vast business network and political fundraising to cover costs, the sheer volume of ongoing cases is stretching those resources thin. Every new indictment brings more bills to pay, and financial fatigue eventually becomes unavoidable. Even wealthy individuals can face bankruptcy if expenses spiral beyond control, and this looming risk places immense pressure on Trump. The financial strain is made worse by the declining profitability of Trump's brand. Many of his businesses, from hotels to golf courses, rely on the public perception of strength and success. But constant headlines about fraud, mismanagement, and lawsuits tarnish that image, scaring off potential investors and business partners. Banks may hesitate to lend money, and organizations may pull out of deals to avoid reputational damage. For someone whose career has been built on projecting financial power, the threat of shrinking revenues is especially damaging. This weakness is amplified when rivals and critics point out how much money is being drained just to stay afloat legally, suggesting that his empire may no longer be as strong as it once appeared. Financial pressure also limits political maneuverability. Campaigns are costly, requiring millions for advertising, staffing, and rallies. When resources are diverted to pay legal expenses, less is available for political campaigning. This imbalance gives his opponents an advantage, as they can focus funds on outreach rather than defense. Moreover, donors may hesitate to contribute if they believe their money will go toward personal legal problems instead of political goals. The mounting financial strain therefore creates a vicious cycle. The more cases pile up, the more money drains away, and the less room Trump has to maneuver both in business and politics. This growing burden represents not just a legal challenge, but a strategic vulnerability that could collapse his wall of influence from within. Number 7, growing public fatigue. Another deep crack in Trump's legal wall is the growing public fatigue surrounding his endless scandals and courtroom drama. At first, every indictment or investigation made headlines, sparking outrage or fierce debate. But over time, repeated cycles of controversy have a dulling effect on the public. What once seemed shocking becomes routine, and when audiences stop reacting with the same intensity, the ability to control the narrative weakens. This fatigue does not just impact general citizens, it affects his supporters too. Even the most loyal base can begin to feel drained by constantly defending or justifying actions that are perpetually under legal fire. The media landscape amplifies this fatigue. News outlets, both supportive and critical, cover every twist in Trump's legal battles. But saturation coverage often backfires, leaving people overwhelmed and desensitized. Instead of rallying to his defense, some begin to tune out altogether. When political engagement is driven by energy and enthusiasm, declining emotional investment can be devastating. Political campaigns thrive on passion. Rallies, donations, and voter turnout depend on it. If even a small fraction of his base grows weary of the constant legal noise, it could translate into weaker mobilization when it matters most. The slow erosion of energy is like a silent crack widening beneath the surface. Beyond the political base, swing voters and independents are even more vulnerable to fatigue. These groups are less tied to party loyalty and more likely to judge based on stability, competence, and credibility. For them, constant legal battles reinforce the image of chaos and distraction. A leader perpetually embroiled in court struggles cannot easily project strength or control. The perception that every week brings a new lawsuit, scandal, or indictment undermines the image of reliability that undecided voters seek. Growing public fatigue, therefore, is not simply about boredom. It's about the psychological toll of chaos. As exhaustion builds, it chips away at both political influence and cultural dominance, leaving Trump's once solid wall increasingly fragile. Number 8. Mounting legal costs. Another crack in Trump's legal wall is the staggering financial cost of defending himself in multiple lawsuits and criminal trials. Legal battles of this magnitude require armies of attorneys, endless filings, expert witnesses, and constant appeals. Each of these comes with astronomical fees that accumulate month after month. Even for someone who brands himself as a billionaire, the financial drain of fighting on so many fronts at once is undeniable. These costs don't simply disappear. They consume resources that could otherwise be used for business ventures, campaign operations, or personal projects. The impact goes beyond Trump's own pocketbook. To manage these expenses, he has increasingly relied on political donations from his supporters, funneling contributions meant for campaign activity into legal defense funds. While this strategy may keep the attorneys paid, it risks alienating donors who expect their money to fuel rallies, advertisements, and outreach rather than courtroom battles. This diversion of funds highlights a growing vulnerability. The more money spent defending the past, the less available to invest in building the future. Political opponents seize on this narrative, portraying him as financially weakened and dependent on his base not just for votes, but for survival. Meanwhile, the perception of financial instability chips away at Trump's image as a savvy, unbeatable businessman. A figure who once symbolized wealth and power now appears burdened by mounting bills and legal debts. For some of his supporters, this may ignite sympathy, but for others, it raises doubts about whether he remains the strong and commanding figure they once admired. Rivals, both political and legal, recognize that draining his finances is not just a byproduct of these cases, it is a strategy in itself. The longer the legal battles stretch on, the more they bleed resources. Mounting legal costs, therefore, are not just an accounting issue. They represent a slow but steady weakening of his foundation, a financial crack that spreads outward into political and personal domains.
Number 9. Shifting public opinion. A powerful crack forming in Trump's legal wall is the shift in public opinion that accompanies each new development in his cases. For years, he has relied on a loyal base that viewed every indictment or investigation as politically motivated. But while his core may remain steadfast, the broader public is not as immovable. Poll after poll shows that independents and swing voters are paying closer attention to the sheer volume of legal troubles piling up, and many are beginning to question whether constant courtroom drama is compatible with national leadership. Even small shifts in perception among undecided voters can have major consequences in tightly contested elections. Beyond the polls, there is also the cultural impact. Trump once thrived on being a symbol of defiance, a figure who seemed immune to scandal and untouchable by traditional political rules. That aura is now eroding. Repeated headlines about indictments, depositions, and potential convictions turn the image of defiance into one of vulnerability. Media coverage plays a significant role here. While some outlets frame him as a victim, others emphasize accountability and the rule of law. This duality means that even among his own supporters, seeds of doubt are being quietly planted. Public opinion is not static. It evolves with exposure, and Trump's repeated legal entanglements provide an endless stream of material for critics to shape narratives. The ultimate danger lies in momentum. Public opinion shifts slowly at first, but once it reaches a tipping point, it accelerates. Historical precedents show that leaders who appear invincible one year can find themselves politically isolated the next, as opinion hardens against them. Trump's challenge is that he must fight on two fronts simultaneously, the courtroom and the court of public perception. Even if he survives legally, if the public perceives him as weakened, distracted, or unfit, the damage will be irreversible. Shifting public opinion is a silent but potent force, one that doesn't require a judge's ruling to dismantle his influence, but can chip away at his standing every time a new headline hits the airwaves.
Number 10, the weight of precedent. The final crack in Trump's legal wall is the weight of precedent. The understanding that once one legal barrier falls, others often follow. For much of his career, Trump has managed to avoid serious legal consequences, reinforcing the perception that he is untouchable. But history shows that when a high-profile figure is finally held accountable, it opens the door for further actions. Prosecutors, judges, and lawmakers gain confidence from earlier rulings, and witnesses or allies who once remained silent may feel safer stepping forward. This momentum effect transforms isolated cases into a cascade of legal challenges, each building upon the last. The danger of precedent lies not just in the legal realm, but in politics as well. Once the public witnesses a leader being held accountable, the cultural narrative changes. The myth of invulnerability shatters, and what was once unthinkable becomes normalized. Other countries have seen this before. Leaders who appeared too powerful to challenge suddenly faced mounting charges once the first conviction or ruling broke through the wall of protection. For Trump, this means every court decision carries symbolic weight, signaling to opponents and allies alike that the old rules of immunity no longer apply. Once that precedent is set, reversing it is nearly impossible. At the same time, precedent influences institutions beyond the courtroom. Political parties reassess their strategies, business partners reconsider alliances, and global observers adjust their expectations. A figure once seen as beyond the reach of law is redefined as vulnerable to it. This shift weakens not just Trump's immediate defenses, but the entire ecosystem of support support that sustains him. Allies may begin to calculate their futures without him, distancing themselves to protect their own reputations. The weight of precedent, therefore, is more than a legal doctrine. It's a psychological and cultural turning point. Once the first crack widens, the wall can no longer hold, and what once seemed unshakable begins to crumble under its own history. As we've seen, Trump's legal wall is no longer the impenetrable fortress it once appeared to be. From mounting indictments and financial strain to shifting public opinion and the heavy weight of precedent, each crack reveals just how fragile his defenses have become. What once seemed like endless immunity is now tested at every corner, and the foundations of his power are under relentless pressure. But this story is about more than one man. It reflects a broader truth about power, accountability, and the systems that hold leaders in check. For decades, Trump built his image on strength, wealth, and the belief that rules didn't apply to him. Now every courtroom battle chips away at that narrative, reminding us that no wall, no matter how tall, can stand forever against the weight of history. The real question isn't whether Trump will continue to fight, because he will, but whether the cracks spreading through his defenses can ever be repaired. And as those cracks widen, the consequences won't just shape his personal future, but the direction of the country itself. So as we watch these battles unfold, one thing is clear: the myth of invincibility is gone. What remains is a struggle that will test not only Trump, but the resilience of the American political and legal systems. The wall is cracking, and the world is watching to see how far it will fall.